incorporating that into your classroom, or something like this in your classroom, will just make our graduates better prepared to enter the workforce and make some stuff happen. So you need to be able to use everything, because your outside partners are going to do that, but internally you want to limit the number of communication.
Right. I mean, I think there should be a set of tools used internally, but absolutely right.
Being such a powerful group app in the classrooms, I established part of that protocol that questions relating to class get asked in a group in the open forum, not as the direct message.
Yeah.
So if a student has a question, they post it out there in the group, everybody can see it. Another student can answer it, or you only have to answer that question one time.
This session, we've labeled it where we're going to talk about Slack and Discord. Only because the world Alex and I come from, we're into esports, and they've got Discord, and I've used Slack for some things, and Brad Gear at college has used Slack for some things, and I've used Slack in the workplace for quite a long time, along with Zoom and some other tools. So this session, let's just kind of make it open to talk about any of the tools that you're using technology-wise. But Alex, would you mind walking us through our Slack?
Yeah, I can do that. We want to go, are we walking through the Ohio Leads one?
Yeah, can you screen share, or do you have that option, or do I have to?
I believe I do. Oh, you've disabled it. Shame on you.
Here you go. No, you should be able to, can you go? Can you share now?
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just go through and let's talk about this as we look at it. And I'll preface, Slack is just an enterprise workforce communication messaging tool. If you've got, if your institution uses Gmail as their backend, or Microsoft with Microsoft Teams, very similar to other applications out there of being able to send direct messages to people. Also are able to set up channels for people to have conversations in. And this is an example here. Those of you that are in Slack, awesome. We've used these tools for a while and kind of gone through some of the aches and pains, or what do they call that, of getting things set up and figuring things out. Managing some of the tools, I think, is even more important than just employing the tools or how you set them up initially. So Alex, can you go through and talk about some of the things that we have set up and create a channel for us, kind of show us how this thing works?
Yeah. So, I mean, as you probably all can see, the basic way that Slack operates is it's a group messenger, but for channels. I personally have a vendetta against like regular texting group chats. So I love Slack. Slack is great. You have various different channels. You can identify each channel with a different purpose. Yeah, we'll create a channel. We'll call it test channel. And one of the nice things is you can either make it a public channel, so anyone in our Slack workplace can join. We can also make it private. We use this typically, we have what's an admin channel. This is where all of the people who help coordinate the workplace kind of have a private chat. So that's one of the options that we use a lot when it comes to coordinating activities on the workspace. There are different integrations that you can use in Slack. We use private chats like that to coordinate that as well. But we'll make this public. You can add a description if you want. We'll call this test for this session. All right, and we'll just create it. Now here you can add everyone, or you can add specific people. I'm just going to, what do you say, Mike?
People in our Slack, that's awesome. Nice job, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. Do we want to add everyone, Mike?
No, because then they'll get a notification. Let's just go ahead and skip it for now.
So we'll skip for now. So this channel is available, but we haven't.
How'd you get in there?
Oh, Keith knows. He knows the ways of Slack. Because even though it's not, we didn't add everyone there, it's still public for people to join. So like, you could go, say you're in another feed. You can do /join. Oh, autocorrect is great. /join, and you do #channel. So you do test channel, and you'll join it. So if you know that it exists, you can join it even though you haven't been added to it.
So we're not going to go into a deep dive on all that type of stuff, but I think I really want to talk about my experience using this in class. Brad, you might be able to talk about using it, your experience in some of our co-curricular project type stuff. And if Dr. Barris is out there, Alan Barris, we've been using it for some of our communication for our student groups and student activities, specifically our game clubs have been using Slack as we've gone remote. They've still been playing Dungeons and Dragons and all of that fun stuff using some of these communication tools. So for me, in my classes, I've actually set up private channels for all of my classes during this. That way people's privacy was protected. But it was a way for us to broadcast messages about when we were meeting for class with the Zoom links and sharing resources. So even before COVID, we were using Slack as a way to, I'm inundated with messages and information about my discipline all the time. And I used Slack specifically for sharing those out. And then it evolved into everybody in the class was inside of the channel, and they use that as a support mechanism for being able to communicate inside of within their own course. This kept us from having to share phone numbers and other information that people might not be too keen on giving out. It really cut down on the amount of email that went back and forth between students, and was specifically really nice because it allowed for group work, because you could set up direct messages with 4 or 5 students and they could communicate there again without having to share too much personal information. It became a way for me, as class progressed, for the learners to be able to help themselves and communicate amongst themselves without the barriers of multiple clicks through an LMS to try to do messaging. It worked as a tool for similar to a social media application that you download on your phone, but it was a separate tool used specifically for work. And I think that's where some of the uses of our tools, and then too many tools, comes into play when those tools cross-pollinate too much. Like delivering instruction through Facebook and Twitter, those that have been able to pull it off, great. But I think having that one channel, and again, it's a workforce enterprise style application that people may use in the field, especially if they're going to get into remote work. I think incorporating that into your classroom, or something like this into your classroom, will just make our graduates better prepared to enter the workforce and make some stuff happen.
Mm-hmm. And if you are thinking about integrating this kind of, I mean, it doesn't have to be Slack specifically, but this kind of digital workplace product into your environment, whether it be K-12, post-secondary, or otherwise, we've actually created a communication protocol that kind of roughly lays out, this is how this should be used in conjunction with email. If you have a universal calendar of sorts for your organization, if you have a universal spot for document creation, collaboration, we have a protocol that we've written that kind of dictates the best practices for the relationship between this workspace and other products. Now, it's not something you must abide to at all times. It's kind of a framework that's flexible in how it can be used. We have it set up with G Suite and Slack, but you can swap out Microsoft products. It's really just as a groundwork for how these products relate to each other and how they can work together. So,
and I think the type of messages that would go through things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, Mike.
Before COVID, I told my students, anything that you got from me that was official was going to would be through email. No official communication about due dates or anything like that would go through Slack. It would just be reminders. But then when we shifted for COVID, some of the rules, adjusted slightly to where some of that official communication only for speed were going through Slack before they would go through email. But always, again, following up with email being the official communication regarding grades and everything else. But if somebody wanted to just, hey, what did we do today in class? Especially when people were missing some of the live stream synchronous sessions, it became a way for the group who were there to communicate and support me, so I didn't have to have single communications with everybody regarding things. It can get messy though, right? Too many channels. That's one of the things that happens sometimes. We use a free version of Slack, which limits some features. Paid versions, you can do a whole bunch of other stuff. You can actually set up groups and things like that. So no, go ahead.
Well, and when we started using this, I started using this product in conjunction with Brad Gear when we started setting up, it's called NSCC projects. And we set this up as kind of just a rough collaboration space. And there wasn't really an intent, a specific project or intent behind it. And it got really messy at first, partially because, we're a bunch of students just like, drooling. We're a bunch of technology students too. So we're just drooling over this new place where we can, send our memes and just talk about random things. But since we wrote the protocol and we've kind of defined our purpose more, it's become a lot more clean, a lot more organized. I've worked a lot better with the different plugins and integrations that we use. So it can, with the right experience beforehand, it can become a very clean, seamless operation way of doing things. So
I tell you what, Alex, can you jump over your screen, open up that NSCC projects? I love the way that is set up, the efficiency of that, because there is room in NSCC projects for students, for memes, for informal. We've also got links in there where it integrates directly with Calendar, with Gmail.
Yeah, I can pull that up.
So in my work with Workforce, if I get an email opportunity from an employer, I don't have to copy and paste. I don't have to rewrite anything. I can dump that directly into my project Slack.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Alex did a great job putting together that communication protocol for us. And very much just like Mike was saying, when to use email, what is official communications. So yeah, we've got the different channels open there on Alex's screen. So you can see we've got daily stand-up. That's just maintaining communication. What are you doing today? Yep. We've got the admin group, which I think is critical to any of the channels, right? Is having that group of decision makers that can communicate close-handedly there. And after kind of everybody got in, it got messy at first.
Yep.
And I think that's just part of the evolution.
Yeah, 100%.
We started to narrow that down. Then we brought in that communication protocol. And at that point, I'm going to say that we had 60, 70% buy-in from students and faculty that were using this system. The next step, and I think that is critical, it speaks to what Amy was talking about earlier, is building the value around this remote communication. And a lot of my last 6 weeks has been focused on building that value. It is so critical that our students, our learners, our faculty understand that this is not just about passing this class. This is not just about getting a good grade. This remote communication is an evolution in our economy. This is so important that our students not only learn how to use Slack, but in my classroom, I intentionally jump back and forth. I do not have that consistency because when you enter the workplace, you're not going to be able to tell your employer, I only communicate on Slack. You're going to have to be able to adapt to your employer, adapt to your customers. And what is important is that our learners learn remote communication, not that they learn Slack, not that they learn Discord, but right. Building that type of value into this system, not only when to use email, understanding official communication, understanding privacy, but how to adapt and how to adjust and how to learn remote communication systems, all now becomes part of the curriculum. And once you can start building that value to your learner, building that value to your coworkers, that this is not a game, it's not a toy, it's not, no disrespect to my gamers out there. But once you build the value that this is legitimate, this is lifestyle, this is your future, and students stop looking at communication as a chore for this class, you know, then it opens things up. I mean, and you no longer have to worry about teaching a specific LMS or specific app on the phone, but you're teaching remote communication as part of project management, as part of industrial electrical, as part of geometry and trigonometry. We're teaching remote communication. And it's like our students that were originally shy, our students that I don't want to do online learning, I wanted to do face-to-face, we can show them that they're actually getting 110% of what they paid for because of this pandemic. They're actually learning so much more than they intended. And again, right back to everything we've talked about today, focusing on that learner, focusing on that customer, that design thinking. Students will say, you know, I hate online learning. Well, let's start asking them why. What do you hate about it? A lot of the times I learned that my students hate online learning because they're not good at time management, because they're not good at remote communication. All right. So it's not that they hate online learning, it's that they need to learn time management. They need to learn remote communication. And that just opens up your classroom to a whole new teaching opportunity, where all of a sudden geometry and trig, they're learning that as a method of learning remote communication. And it becomes fun for the learner, it becomes valuable for the learner, and it's very quickly then integrated across campus, where we brought this out of the classroom into student groups. We then expanded where we've got workforce partners communicating directly with students in Slack because of that remote communication protocol. And again, I'm going to throw props, and not to get you guys' heads any bigger than they are, but Alex and Mike really helped me develop this a year and a half ago. So we were already into the remote environment before the pandemic hit. I think that gave us a leg up developing, where we had this core group that we could just start bringing people in instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, which again goes back to a lot of the discussion from this morning.
Well, and I think too, right, it's so much easier to use these tools and teach these tools when they're just part of how things are done initially, without being a rapid response to a pandemic. I know, you know, we've used Slack in the classroom for about 3 years now. Also, you know, out in the middle of nowhere, Cornfield, Ohio, where the college is, lots of snowy roads and roads that don't get plowed. We've actually done remote delivery of synchronous content for classes as part of when the student would message me, hey, I don't feel it's safe driving in today. I'm like, okay, cool. You can come to class through Zoom. So I've been kind of prepared for some of this and using this technology, and it does take a while to figure out. I mean, Alex, you and I have been talking, and I'm still learning new ways to be able to potentially make this work. But again, this is where some of the sharing, some of the stuff that we're trying to do here with everybody else, hopefully shows people what some of the potential is. Now, Alan, what about you? You've used this for some of the co-curricular gaming stuff, right?
Yeah, I actually started using Slack for my non-school gaming group, and I ended up really liking it for that. And then we ended up creating a Slack group for specifically for my D&D group on campus. But then we ended up using that as the basis for just creating a larger Slack presence for the game club in general. Mm-hmm. So now we have panels set up in it for video games specifically. We've got one for tabletop and card games. We've got one for general role-playing games, like tabletop stuff. And then we've got groups set up for each of the individual tables that we're running, each of the games that's actually going. So right now over the summer, I'm running 2 game sessions because I'm off teaching right now. So I've got a channel set up for my Wednesday night group and a channel set up for my Thursday night group. And they're mostly the same people, but it helps me sort out the information that one group needs versus the other group. And it's just nice for keeping people abreast of what's going on. I've actually used I use links to Spotify to put up playlists and stuff like that as well. And we use it as a sort of a default communication method with that group of students on some other channels, and it works very nicely. We are also using Discord as specifically for its voice channel functions, which is the one thing I really wish Slack had was a some kind of built-in chat function. I mean, you can articulate it with I think you can link some various apps in, but it's not quite as nice as with Discord. It's just part of the program. It's nice. And it works as a good default. It's not great. I mean, the audio quality is fine for what we need, but it's a little distracting having 2 channels running of communication. But mostly, I've trained them to keep the important stuff, like the main communication with me on Slack, and then we just do Discord is just for while we're playing.
Nice.
So the couple hours while we're up, that's primarily what they've been using Discord for. So there you go.
Yeah, I wish that's the one thing I enjoy about Discord. We use Discord with our esports club at Hilltop, and I think most of the principles for setting up Slack apply to there as well. But
Yeah.
I miss voice. Voice is a very nice feature to have. I know Slack has only recently upped the quality on their video as well. So, yeah.
Alex, you mind, you go ahead and stop screen share here so we can engage the rest of the audience. Anybody out there have any questions at this point, or want to share some other communication tools that they may have used? Yeah, Discord, Amy's saying is their favorite second screen, but does not do well as a primary contact software. Yeah, 100%. As an example, our official communication to students about some of the town halls and things that we were doing over as our response to COVID-19 and virtual town halls, an email would go out, but email being temporal and when people check it and knowing what's going on wasn't always an effective way to communicate to people about things happening in the moment. I would hop on Slack when we were starting the town hall and shoot the link there and get at least 2 or 3 people to show up because of that immediacy of that communication channel. So,
may I ask a question as a faculty member?
100%.
How are you managing the expectation of students that you answer everything on Slack within 2 minutes?
I ignore them for longer than 2 minutes.
And do you have any cognitive dissonance that you've had to manage from that behavior?
Well, in my life, I've learned when people come and ask me something, ignore them for at least 15 minutes and they'll usually figure it out themselves. Because everybody's first reaction is to, when they run into a roadblock, is to immediately ask versus spending too much time trying to figure it out for themselves. So that 15-minute rule seems to hold up pretty well, even in both face-to-face and digital environments. It's one of the reasons I leave my classroom, especially during lab time, because I don't want to be there available for answers or the first primary contact for answers when they should be figuring stuff out on their own.
I'd like to chime in on this one too. With Zoom, Slack being such a powerful group app in the classrooms, I established part of that protocol that questions relating to class get asked in a group in the open forum, not as the direct message.
Yeah.
So if a student has a question, they post it out there in the group, everybody can see it. Another student can answer it, or you only have to answer that question one time and everybody sees the answers. So it really does help kind of create that cohort thinking, that collaboration, and saves me quite a bit of time. As instead of answering the same question through email 15 times, I answer it once as a group chat, and students might not even know they have that question when they get the answer. So it works pretty powerful that direction too.
Yeah, and Brad, I'd echo that. You know, Mike and I have done some online programs in the past at some different places, and we would redirect students that would DM, you know, the instructors to the group chat, especially if it's, you know, for those kinds of, you know, help questions or whatever that we want them to socialize. And I think the other thing I would add to that is, you know, get back to what you said earlier, Brad, about that this, you know, I think we should take Slack and some of these communication protocols out of, you know, make sure that they're in context and teach the students that this is what they're going to be using out on the job. So, you know, for example, I've worked for a few different companies, you know, over the last 5 or 6 years, and all of my jobs have been remote, and we use Slack. And, you know, in industry, there's no expectation whatsoever that you're going to get answered in 20 seconds, even though Slack is more, you know, is more immediate than email, for example. It's also easy to get, you know, fall through the cracks. And it gets back to kind of what we talked about before with the communication protocol. Like, I know with my boss, if I really want something to stick, I'm going to put it in an email. But if I just have you know, we use Slack around the office in the same way you would do if I walked over to your cubicle and tapped you on the shoulder, right? And if you happen to be in your cubicle, you're going to answer. And if you're not, then, you know, you come back later. So yeah, I think, again, it comes back to, you know, kind of framing these things in skills that people will be using for remote work. And especially after COVID, I mean, we've seen a lot of companies right now that weren't necessarily open to remote work are open to remote work, and these skills are going to be more and more important over time.
Given that position, do you explicitly teach? That is, do you explicitly, other than just redirecting from direct messages and other things, do you give here's the etiquette of how we're going to use Slack in this classroom and what your expectation should be? Or do you just sort of let it happen, enculturation happen within the room itself? And a second add-on, why Slack? Because Microsoft Teams is far more popular in most workplaces.
So I would say that I would make it explicit as part of the communication plan up front of your class. So if you're going to use Slack and that's one of your communication channels, I think you explicitly put that out there, and then you give the rules. And so that's what Mike and I did as well. It's just that sometimes people, you know, in the moment or whatever, they, you know, it's easier to just DM the instructor than it would be to put it out there in the channel. So part of it is giving explicit instruction and then shaping behavior over time. And I would say for me personally, I've found in my experience that Slack is way more popular than Microsoft products in the places that I've worked. So we use Slack at the organizations that I've worked at over the last few years. But again, I think getting back to what Brad said, I think what we need to do is teach the concept of the tools, right? Because I mean, if you know how to use Slack, or you know how to use, you know, GChat, or you know how to use Microsoft Teams, I think the actual tool doesn't really make any difference. It's the concept of this is a communication channel and this is a tool. And these are the kinds of ways normatively that they're used in in industry. And these are the kinds of ways that you should use them, you know, in our class. And this is what you should learn. And then if you go someplace and you learned on Slack and you hop over to GChat, it's not a big deal. It's just a different, you know, a couple different buttons and things are in a different place. Same thing with Zoom, right? I mean, you could use Google Meet, or you could use, you know, Microsoft Teams, but again, the etiquette and the way you use the tools would be the same.
And Amy, as my use of Slack has evolved, Originally, when I first set it up, it was, hey, this is a channel for our class. I'm going to throw up some supplemental resources in here. It's not official, but if this is the discipline that you want to go into, these are things that check them out. That evolved throughout the years to the point where, relying on the learners to curate resources for things and making assignments where they were required to post a video and or an article in our Slack channel. So slowly kind of teaching them the tool that way through sharing supplemental resources myself, and then bringing them into the sharing part of the equation.
Yeah, and I would say as far as you got, I think your three mainstays are Slack, Discord, and Microsoft Teams. It depends on what your organization ecosystem is. As far as the work that we do in our NSCC projects, Word, G Suite, Google Docs, Drive. I've worked with Microsoft Teams too. I think Microsoft Teams has a leg up on being directly integrated with Office, so that's really nice. I think it just depends on, what's your document processor preference, what's your storage preference. So I don't think there's huge disadvantages to using one over the other.
Kara has got a really great question in the chat, right? Because this is an extension of our previous conversations. How can we go about getting college-wide agreement on a communication plan? Getting people to agree to anything globally on a campus is challenging, to say the least, right? But I mean, anybody else? I want people to feel like they have the opportunity to ask questions and talk. So post them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand on any of this stuff. But I think for me, one, it's been working out the bugs in a small group or testing it out in a small group. So like my class, like Brad, like Alan, our division, honestly, on campus tried to do a Slack and it crashed and burned. And I think it was primarily because we didn't see the value in it. And I think that's just one of the things when you're going to formulate and lock down and try to get people to buy into any type of protocols, you're going to have to be really, really explicit with what the expectations are for using it, and not put on huge expectations up front that this is now the one and only thing that we're going to use. Because I think you are going to learn, like we did, where it might work in some cases, might not work in others. And don't go in with the expectation that the entire college is going to buy into what you're doing with that communication, unless it comes from administration. For us, Alan, and forgive me if I misspeak, it would have to go through our governance model, right? If we were actually going to formulate any of these things as gospel, that would be the way it would go through our institution.
Yeah, and we might want to think about, since we've been talking about reforming our governance procedure, that would be a good time to talk about the role of communication and what channels we're going to encourage.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Everybody else that's out there, this is kind of an open question. I mean, how many of your institutions have communication protocols that are provided to you? Even people in workforce, or do these things just organically pop up and then kind of get overgrown and then we cultivate them? I mean, what's actually out there in paper about how we're supposed to communicate?
Well, Mike, I can speak to out in workforce. So I've worked in both, right? I've worked in some smaller companies where it's organic. It usually gets messy, in a particular tool. But one thing I will say to kind of, follow up with what Alex said is usually, in workforce, your IT department is going to tell you what platform you can use, right? Because you're either a Microsoft shop or you're a kind of a Google environment shop or whatever. They're going to say you can use Slack or you can't use Slack. And that's, right, that's just going to be, kind of your tool set that you can use. And then I've seen it from smaller companies where, Slack, for example, if that's what you use, it's just a free for all. It gets messy quick. At the company I'm at right now, they are all the way down to, you can't create new channels. They have naming conventions. They, if you want a new channel, you make a request to IT. they have to approve it. Again, which, generally speaking, it's a fairly, low lift to do that. If you have a reasonable reason to have a channel, they'll let you create one.
Mhm.
But that can get a little bit, that can get a little bit restrictive as well. So it's a balance between kind of this free flowing of information and collaboration, and then not just, to your point, having the weeds kind of overgrow everything and having to burn it down and start over every once in a while. So, but I guess the question I would have to follow up with that is, at the institutional level, what kind of guidance or authority can the IT department say is like, listen, it feels like it's a two-part process. One is a communication plan, but to put a communication plan together, you need to know what tools you have, to use, right? So you have an LMS. What LMS do you have? You have a chat server. If you want to use it, this is the one you use. So it seems like it's kind of a two-step process. Here are the tools that you have available. And then once you know what that ecosystem looks like, here's what the communication plan is across the organization.
And this is a fundamental thing, right? Where we like, don't just use tools, just use tools.
Exactly. Don't. I guess the thing is with IT, this is the array of things you can use. We're a Microsoft shop, so we're using Microsoft Teams. You can use any of the things in there that you want. You don't have to. As a faculty or as the academic departments, you can decide if that's part of the communication plan or not. But for a Microsoft shop, you're not going to use Slack or you're not going to use GChat, those kinds of things. It seems like a two-step process.
Yeah, and from experience of working at Northwest State's IT department, I think you guys have the benefit of either Microsoft or Google. You're not, particularly tied to a certain option, I think.
Well, and again, if we're going to be communicating and sharing with others at other institutions, like we almost have to be able to use everything. In all honesty, right? There's some people I have Microsoft team meetings with. There's some people I'm chatting even at our own institution using the GChat. Again, I think goes back to that whole just the basic understanding of how to effectively communicate using a variety of tools.
Right.
But whatever the next big thing is.
Right. I guess, Mike, the one thing I'd say about that is we have the same thing in industry, right? So if I'm going to work with a client and they want to set up a meeting in GoToMeeting or WebEx, then that's what we're going to use. But they'll set up the meeting, it's on their servers, and I show up and click a link, right? Yeah. I think that's different than having an internal set of tools that you use. And I'll give an example. Right now, the company I work at took two companies and merged. One company was a Slack company, and the other company is a GChat company. Personally, I hate GChat, but that they use that. We got the worst of both worlds because we use both now, and now it's just hard to know who you actually communicate with. So there are people that I Slack, and they don't use Slack, so they never actually get the message. And so I have to go GChat. Yeah. So now what I have is when you get that, let's just use everything. Now I have to send 3 messages. I got to send an email, a GChat, and a Slack just to get somebody's attention, and that's the worst possible outcome.
Yeah.
So I think having we use everything and just decide is probably the worst choice you can make.
So you need to be able to use everything because your outside partners are going to do that, but internally you want to limit the number of communication.
Right. I mean, I think there should be a set of tools used internally, but absolutely right. I mean, externally we use, people use GoToMeeting, people use WebEx, people use Zoom, people use, Google Hangouts, and we just have to go with the flow because you can't control other institutions. But I think it's important to standardize on your own institution. Otherwise it becomes less efficient, in my opinion.
Right. Well, so here's an idea that popped up this past week through some conversation with faculty who are going to be doing some remote stuff. We're going to set up a Slack for them, or we're not going to add a new Slack workspace. We're going to take an existing Slack workspace and they're going to test having a student moderator of the learning environment. So almost like a TA would be in the classroom, there's going to be a student moderating that Slack environment as a test. Because one of the fears is now, Brad, you've got the NSCC project Slack, I've got my design Slack. Alan, we've got the game Slack. Like, at what point does the institution just need to have a Slack that we're all using? Or is that even like the ideal? Because then we have all, you know, then people have back channels and certain things, and it just becomes a big, huge mess. And I think that you want to, there's a fine line between that amount of time playing with things and figuring them out versus when they're formally codified and become part of what you do going forward. And I think we're at that point with our institution and Slack, where if we get any more buy-in from people wanting to use it, it's probably going to be something that we take to IT and request, because we've proven its value and that we're using it for a variety of things, if that makes any sense. Any questions out there, folks? Or is everybody just waiting for lunch? Because it's getting to be about that time. We got about 10 minutes left in this session.
You have a question in the chat.
Yeah, what's up?
I said you have a question in the chat.
What is that question? Because there's a whole bunch of stuff over there. What question are we talking about, Paige?
Give me a second. I'm on my phone, so it's different settings.
Yeah, Zoom on the phone isn't the best experience. I don't know any.
Okay, Amy Dries says, I love the student moderator idea for the classroom. Do we have student worker funds to pay for it, or a core of prepared students?
I believe I believe that there's funds available, Amy. I think student worker, yes. Prepared students. Actually, is our student worker who's going to be doing this here in this session? Let me check through the list of names. Lucy, are you here? Lucy is in here. Can you hear me, Lucy?
I'm here.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You've been voluntold to moderate
Yes.
a Slack channel for some online classes?
Yes, I have.
Awesome. So what are your questions, comments, concerns? Do you have any?
Mine?
Yeah, have you well, you know what's going on?
Well, I am slightly overwhelmed. I have been honored with this position. I just want to make sure that I can be a good example, since it's the first position being done. I am in communications with my, I want to say supervisors or my colleagues.
I think the faculty member.
Faculty, yes, okay. And I'm just rolling with it. I'm more than happy to be here. I'm happy to help, and I'm excited. It's a new position.
Well, so I think what I noticed in Slack from the learner side of the equation using it is that, you know, there's usually one person in class who's got their stuff together better than everybody else, right? And that person then becomes, hey, what was that he said? Because some people are afraid to ask the professors questions, or what was the homework? And, you know, like me, I'm like, ask somebody else, don't ask me. And you kind of become that model of what the students should be. I think that's kind of some of the training that will probably work in with you as you get involved in this Slack and work into the other ones, is that really it's not that different, right? The difference, and I think we're going to talk about this on Wednesday, the difference really isn't in online versus face-to-face. It's that synchronous and asynchronous interactions. So Slack will afford you a little bit more synchronous interactions with your peers than through email. You know, you'll have a profile picture there. You're able to jump on and do a video chat if somebody has some questions. So more than anything else, as a moderator of a channel, you're really just there to provide help and support when people need it. Of, you know, I don't really get this. Can you explain it to me? Just like somebody might do in a classroom. The technology is probably adding a little bit of stress regarding it, but I think for the most part, you're just acting like somebody who's there to help other people.
Yep.
And Amy, we probably will, if this works, we'll probably, hopefully be able to expand this then out into some other classes as well.
Sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think that's what I love most about, what we're doing at Northwest State specifically. Shameless self-promotion here. Our program, my program, the design program, using this stuff all day, every day, helping people figure it out. I think that is one of the luxuries we have being a community college. Part of our mandate is to be innovative. Dr. Thompson, I don't think he's still in the audience, but has been really supportive of innovative, crazy ideas. And I'm just excited to continue to be able to share. So we've got about 5 more minutes left before break. Any questions, comments, concerns at all from anybody in the audience?
I just wanted to let everyone know if you have any questions about that communications protocol that we authored, or any questions about Slack, setting up an environment, integrations, anything like that, I am more than available to answer all your questions and work with you on setting something up, or, navigating the waters on, how to properly do this stuff and how to abide by a flexible framework. So.
Yeah, Alex, if we get enough people interested, we'll definitely set up maybe an afternoon workshop or something, right? I mean, that's kind of what this is all about, finding out what people need and figuring out how we can help support them. So.
Vaderpool, can you go a little bit further into what exactly you mean by synchronous and asynchronous? Yeah,
so synchronous is when, like, what we're having right now is a synchronous meeting, because we're all kind of the time that we're together is synchronized. So asynchronous would be when this video is recorded and up on YouTube and somebody watches it 2 days, 3 days, 4 days later. That's asynchronous. Does that help?
Yeah, I have not known what you meant by that the entire time that you've been saying it.
Hopefully now you know. And that is a great way to end our morning of talking about communication. Make sure you use words that your learners understand, because that's, I think, the one thing, and I'll end on this little rant since nobody else is going to stop me, or you can leave if you want to and go do an early lunch. But we have to make it easier for others to communicate our message for us. I think that's one of the bottom lines of all of this that I've realized. Like, for me to be able to send an email and expect everybody to read it at the same time prior to what's going on, it's not very likely to happen. It's going to get lost in the mix, right? For me to tell every single student, make sure every single student in my program knows, hey, the library has books available for you, and the course reserve, this was a true example, course reserve. Well, they don't even know what that word means, right? But for me, or that phrase means, but if I find the students who I know who are the ones who are dialed in and communicating with the class already, and explain to them what course reserves are and use language that they're familiar with, hey, they're just free textbooks that you're able to check out, then they become the people who help to spread that message, and it's not all on me 100%. If that makes any sense.
Can I say that as a communicator, why is it not on you to say free textbooks in the library instead of course reserve? Because
100%.
isn't it human-centered design to meet students where they are with their language as opposed to yours? My dog doesn't agree, by the way.
I thought there was a dog in the space, Amy. I thought somebody let in a dog. And that's
Let's slam the dogs in.
I think, Amy, another place where, and again, we're going to bump up against lunch here, another place we run into issues with that is all the acronyms that we throw around. Not even with our students, but with our peers, right? All over the place. Hi, puppy. Somewhere. Hey, there's a puppy. Yes. Yeah, like being a little bit more deliberate with, oh yes, dog show, here we go. Everybody break out your puppies, break out your dogs. All right, so if we solved any of your problems, or if we made more, I guess we did what we were supposed to do this morning. No major catastrophes this morning, so knock on wood that we'll keep it up this afternoon. We're gonna do an hour-long lunch, that way we can sort some things out here. You can take your time, nobody has to watch me eat, because that's no fun for anybody. But we're gonna reconvene, same Zoom link, at 1 o'clock. And we are going to talk with Mike Jacobs, who has been really instrumental on our campus about some ways that we've used to get messaging out to learners. And we'd love for you guys to come back, participate, and share some of the ways that you worked on communicating with learners. And then we will wrap up. That's the only session we really have for the afternoon. And then we've got a podcast where Eric Ward and I, along with some others, will kind of recap some of the stuff throughout the day. So thank you everybody for joining us this morning. The sharing in the Zoom chat's been awesome. The sharing in Slack has been awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This whole thing is about sharing and learning from each other. And I think we've been doing good so far. So enjoy your lunch, and we will see you in about an hour. Take care, folks. This room will be shutting down.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Take care.